Today we're going to talk about social isolation, dating, and disclosure for PAS older adults. So if anybody should not be in here, this is your chance. Okay. So research shows that by 2015, 1 in 2 people with HIV/AIDS will be age 50 and older. Overall, the rates of HIV/AIDS among older adults 50 plus have increased more than 61% from 2001 to 2007. This population of older adults with HIV/AIDS includes long-term survivors, newly diagnosed people, and newly infected people. The latest national data show that adults 50 and older account for 17% of all new HIV/AIDS diagnoses. HIV-positive individuals aged 50 years and older are more socially isolated than their younger counterparts. Most older Americans rely on family members during illness. Older HIV-positive individuals perceive many barriers to receiving emotional and social support from friends and family, including concealment of HIV status and others' fear of casual transmission of HIV. For some people living with HIV/AIDS, HIV-positive peers replace those lost because of HIV-related stigma and rejection. To help us understand the issues of social isolation, dating, and disclosure for HIV-positive older adults, our panelists are Jay Siegel. Jay is a licensed psychologist with a private practice in Center City, Philadelphia. He specializes in treating lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and questioning clients. He also has 30 years of experience working with those living with HIV. Jay has lectured and conducted workshops on treating LGBT clients relating to relationships, couples, parenting, and substance abuse. Jay has a master's in education. Next is Rebecca Richmond. Rebecca is a paralegal with the AIDS Law Project of Pennsylvania, a nonprofit law firm that provides free legal services for people living with HIV/AIDS. Rebecca is also a volunteer with the LGBT Elder Initiative and serves as the coordinator of the EI's free LGBT legal plan. And last but not least, we have Terry Clark. Terry is the coordinator of prevention services at Action AIDS in Philadelphia. Action AIDS is committed to creating an AIDS-free generation through a combination of proven strategies. Terry also serves as the secretary of the board of the LGBT Elder Initiative and is a member of Widener University's Consortium on Sexuality and Aging. So I just want to say something about how the format of this program. I'm going to address questions to each one of the panelists. They'll answer the questions. We have about an hour and 10 minutes to get through all the information. And so if you could please hold your questions until the end of the program. If there is still time, we'll take questions from the audience. And I also just wanted to say that our intern from the Elder Initiative is in the audience. David, if you could raise your hand. David is going to be taking pictures of the panelists. And so I just wanted to let everyone know, if you see David with the camera, pointed this way, not that way. All right, so first question to Jay. What is the impact of social isolation on older adults who are HIV positive, and how can PAS older adults avoid becoming socially isolated?
Thanks, Neshy. I'm glad to be part of this panel. It's something I deal with every day with many of my clients. And there's a lot of reasons people become socially isolated as they age. Particularly people who are HIV positive, they're still dealing with a lot of their own internalized AIDS phobia. There's also a lot of fear of stigmatization, of their own fears of discrimination, and so sometimes they don't reach out to even socialize, let alone date. And so what happens is they become more isolated, more depressed sometimes, more anxious about growing older, and the more isolated they are, the worse all those things become. And then sometimes people do things, they're sometimes harmful, obviously, to deal with those uncomfortable feelings. And a lot of times those things can be self-destructive behaviors like substance abuse, sex addiction, unprotected sex. And of course we all know in the internet world it's real easy to do all that stuff and feel like you're less isolated. But that's not really what's helpful for people to deal with your depression. You have to talk to your friends about how you feel about being discriminated against, if you're feeling any stigma, if you feel any internalized shame about being HIV positive. And some of that is also different depending on if you're long-term survival or more newly diagnosed. Lots of older gay men who are newly diagnosed dealing with some different issues than long-term survivors. And, they get a lot of judgment from people as to, well, you're 55 years old, like, you should know better. And so there's a lot of judgment. And again, people's fear of judgment creates more isolation. If I'm afraid I'm going to be judged, I may not go out and join that group or anything like that. On a positive note, I'm sure we'll talk more about that later, the greater social connection people to have, the less isolation they experience, the better healthy coping strategies they can develop. Because it's important to have a network of people that you can relate to as well. Some of the research that's been done shows that men are more isolated socially than women, which is not a surprise. And gay men are a little better than heterosexual men. We've had some networks for 30 years of people, so if you want to, you can engage, a little bit more. But it's really important to develop some healthy strategies for your own well-being by being connected to people, joining groups, and things like that. The one last thing I'll say, I'm not exactly sure how long you want me to go on, but the last thing I'll say, and then we can address it maybe more with questions, is you can also avoid isolation by staying employed longer if that's possible and looking at the possible options for that. I was just asking Rebecca a question about a client of mine now, who wants to remain employed, but he's 60 and it's a full-time job and sometimes is tired. But staying employed helps you be less socially isolated. And if you are retired or on disability, there's other ways of staying connected to people through volunteering, like the Elder Initiative or any of the other great service groups we have in Philadelphia. And then there's other things that people do for well-being. I mean, some people are religious or spiritual and have a community that they connect to in that way. So the important issue and message is really to stay connected to people. You have to stay connected to people to become less socially isolated. And then deal with some of these other emotional issues that you might be experiencing, whether it's shame or guilt or fears of discrimination, fears of growing old, the anxieties around that.
Great, thank you. So you had mentioned the internet. This question is for Rebecca. The internet has become a virtual and central point of contact for many adults, including many gay and bi men searching for sex partners. Popular dating and cruising websites often allow an option for HIV status to be provided and can facilitate negotiation of sexual behavior, including sexual positioning, serosorting, and the use of condoms. What are the pros and cons of this approach to dating and sexual connections? What are the legal challenges? Is full disclosure necessary? And is lying about your status criminal?
Thank you, Hashi. So there are pros and cons to this approach to dating and to sexual connections. The biggest pro in general is just that you're able to be selective in who you're choosing to date from the safety of your own home, computer, cell phone, etc., whatever. But there are some major legal challenges that internet dating poses as well. In Pennsylvania, there are no HIV-specific criminalization laws specifically. However, the Crimes Code does contain a few HIV-specific sentences that are just related to prisoners and sex workers in particular. General criminal laws, though, are used to prosecute people based on HIV status. Most commonly, we see things like reckless endangerment. We also see aggravated assault, which could carry a maximum 20-year sentence. Attempted murder, terroristic threats, which may include things like fighting, and sexual assault, which could include something like having sex without disclosure. That said, in the legal framework, the most important thing that I think is happening on dating websites is that you're creating evidence. Some sites are allowing a section where you can disclose your status. You can check a box saying negative, positive, unknown, whatever. So if you're checking positive on the site, you are creating evidence that you've disclosed. If you're checking negative but you're positive, you're also creating evidence that you've lied about your status. And we're sympathetic to wanting to keep your status private and to not necessarily have that out on a dating website for other daters to see or for visitors to the site to see. But we do want you to know that when you choose to lie or you choose to make whatever decision you're making, that the evidence is there and it could potentially be used against you if someone wanted to use it. And there is a certain loss of privacy there, and there are no laws that are requiring you to keep it private either. So is lying about your status criminal? Not inherently, but it is ill-advised. It's important here to consider the reason for your lie. If it's, you don't want to be rejected, you want to get the date, you like this person, you don't necessarily want them to find out your status just from the box that you checked on the website. That's fine, but we just want you to be mindful that the evidence does remain afterwards, and again, it could be used against you if someone did unfortunately want to use it. Full disclosure. Is full disclosure necessary? It's not necessary, but it can protect you if you have the evidence that you've disclosed. So in this way, internet dating can serve as an excellent protective measure, or alternatively, it could be used as an incriminating one. So the downside of full disclosure, as I mentioned already, is that it can compromise your privacy. And it really is up to the individual to consider the pros and cons and really weigh them out and to decide what's best for you in your own life. And I think that, when considering this, we encourage mindfulness of your choice to disclose. It's a very personal choice and it's your choice. It's just, we want everyone to know the legalities of it and to be considering that in making their choice. So, thank you.
Great. So the last question is for Terry in this round. Terry, despite the rise in HIV infections among older people, few prevention efforts explicitly target older adults with age-sensitive information and education. What efforts are being made at targeting older adults, both pos and neg, with prevention, messaging, and behavior?
So it's a great question, Heshi. And first of all, we can't talk about HIV without talking about sex. And when we begin to work with older adults, many of you in this group are older adults, there's a lot of stigma around talking about sex and aging. So the first step before we even look at positive and negative messaging is really to acknowledge for ourselves and those people who are providing us services. So people are healthcare providers, people who are running senior centers, people delivering services of all sorts to aging individuals, that sexuality is something that happens from our birth until we die. and our sexuality evolves over our years. And many of us believe myths about sexuality and aging that are pretty abundant. And I don't want to go into the myths now because that's something we're going to talk about later this afternoon in the third workshop of this aging and HIV track, which has been sponsored by the Health and Human Services. Brett, thank you very much. So we'll go more into the myths in that workshop, but just sort of to summarize it is that we live in a very ageist society. And they assume, folks assume that people over 50 are sexually dead. And that why would we even want to talk about dating? Why would we even want to talk about intimacy? Why do we even want to talk about condoms? We don't need to do that because people over 50 are not having sex. Well, yes we are, and yes we do need to talk about that. And again, we can't talk about HIV prevention without talking about sex and sexual health. So just to sort of give folks a definition, when I talk about this with the clients at Action AIDS, and we talk about HIV in primary prevention, so helping folks prevent HIV from the first place, and then if folks are already positive, what can we do to help reduce the chances of reinfection, co-infection, and transmission? So there's a lot of prevention efforts that happen with folks regardless of their HIV status. But sexuality is something that happens above the waist, right? So it's not, when we talk about prevention messages, oftentimes we think, oh, what we do below the waist and in between our legs, right? And there's so much more to sex and sexuality than that. Does anybody know what the largest sex organ is? No, that Wendy's pointing to her brain. That's not the largest, that's the most important. What's the largest sex organ? The skin. The skin. Okay. There you go. And it's a good sex organ to have. So, talking to folks about the importance of touch and intimacy and not necessarily focusing on what's below the waist and in between the legs. So that's the first step when we're going to be talking about prevention messages, that we need to reframe what we mean by sex and sexuality, and we need to take a holistic, sort of above the waist approach to this. So we do that at Action AIDS. I do that in my work in sexuality education. And we also need to move away from this idea that sex is performance oriented. We get so many messages that the goal of having sex is orgasm, and in how many different positions can you do it. Well, and especially as we age, physically, our bodies are not able to respond sexually as we were when we're younger. And that's okay. We need to learn how to embrace that and evolve with that and be positive about what's happening to our changing bodies. So it's no surprise, right, that sexuality education specifically for older adults is sorely lacking, right? We can't talk about sex, and we don't even think older adults are sexual. But there are distinct needs and learning styles for older adults when it comes to education. And let's just talk for a couple minutes about some of the differences between educating younger adults and older adults around HIV. So older adults may believe that HIV and other sexually transmitted infections only affect younger people. They don't really feel like they're at risk. For women who have menopause, they're not really even thinking about safer sex, birth control, that sort of thing. Men, don't have it on the radar that I need to be using condoms. The older adults who engage in risky sexual behaviors are less likely than teens or young adults in their 20s to use condoms consistently, consider treatment for IV drug use or substance use, and refrain from sharing needles. So many of our older adults haven't even gotten the messages that we try to impart on younger people. Healthcare workers are really uncomfortable talking with older adults around sexuality and testing. And if they're working with somebody who's positive and that patient wants to talk about disclosure, they want to talk about reducing the risk with their partner or their partners, the healthcare provider is just not comfortable talking with older adults about that. Whereas they may be with younger folks. Doctors may be a little bit more comfortable, especially pediatricians, talking to younger folks about sexual health. We find that older adults know less factually around HIV and how to reduce the risk than younger people do. Older adults also suffer from safer sex burnout. So if they've been practicing safer sex in their younger years, and now in their older years and their aging, they may not be willing to practice safer sex as regularly. And finally, older adults have more bouts with depression due to coping. We've talked about this earlier today, and Heshi mentioned that in his opening piece. There's a lot of comorbidities, things like high blood pressure, diabetes, and heart problems. They become more dependent on others for care. So when we're talking about HIV prevention with older adults, we need to factor all that in, versus when we're talking with younger adults about it, those issues are not existing. So a couple of programs that are doing very well in terms of prevention messages for older adults are, thank you, Age is Not a Condom is a program that is part of ACREA's work. And Heshi, if you could just get on the link there and just bring up that website. I think the internet should work, and while Heshi's working on that, I just want to mention the link above that, and pardon me for not being very visible. No, the one below that. That one's going to take too long. Sorry, Heshi. The Safer Sex for Seniors is a website that's out of the Widener Consortium on Sexuality and Aging, and that has a video featuring older adults and also resources, frequently asked questions. There's an Ask the Expert section where people can find information all specifically geared for older adults. It's going to take a little bit. Well, let me continue talking while we're trying to queue up the website. And Age is Not a Condom also features older adults, pictures of older adults, and just seeing older adults in prevention messaging is a validating way, right? So if we can't see folks, they're invisible. The other, let me just talk about a little bit about the fact sheets we created at Action AIDS have an older adult picture. We also have, yes. Yeah, okay. Toss it out and just go on to the next slide. Hit the arrow button. There you go. The Take Action posters that we developed at Action AIDS feature older adults giving different messages around getting tested, talking about HIV prevention, talking about living with HIV, getting support, volunteering. So this is an example of how we're trying to feature older adults in prevention messages versus younger adults. CREA also has a number of stories that feature older adults. There's a brochure by Merck, 10 Tips for Living Well with HIV for Over 50, which is a great example of material specifically designed for older adults. Another piece of material from ACREA, Preventing HIV in Older Adults, and Older and Wiser, The Many Faces of HIV. So there are some things, and I just want to show this last piece, a checklist for healthy aging. So this comes out of ACREA and SAGE and a few other New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene collaborative partners. But you see how it says blood pressure, prostate exam, diabetes screening, and HIV test. So, trying to get the messages out there. It features an older adult. And it's really important that for those of us in prevention, that we begin to think about marketing our materials and our programming and our messages to older adults.
Thank you, Terry. So, Jay, if I am hesitant to date or to disclose my status as an HIV-positive person, what can I do to alleviate my concerns? Is there a best way to tell somebody that I want to date or to have sex with that I'm HIV positive?
Well, when I'm working with clients, I always try to start with where they're at with their own acceptance of their HIV status. Because if we all know in dating, Whether you're HIV positive or not, whether you're younger or older, we're always at risk for someone's going to reject us, no matter what that reason might be. So a lot of what we talk about before we even talk about how do I disclose my status, or do I want to disclose my status, is how they feel about it. If someone has a lot of shame around their status, they're going to be much more vulnerable to this whole process. So the first thing we generally talk about is, how do you feel about it? Do you have shame? Are you afraid of being judged, stigmatized? Some of those things, I mentioned before. So hopefully you can work through where you're at with that and a level of acceptance, so you're less vulnerable to any type of rejection. But certainly, as most of us know in this room, everybody has different reactions to HIV positive people in general, and dating them or not. And I'm always interested with negative people when they come in and they disclose that I met somebody positive, and I was happy that they shared that with me, and I'm not sure how to deal with that. So the first thing is to be comfortable with your status yourself, and to learn to accept it and not have a lot of internalized shame. And then you have to just decide how you want to handle it. Terry mentioned some things that I think are really important to look at as well, which are generalizable for anybody dealing with dating. Frequently, again, in the age of internet, it's so easy to get fast sex. People just look at what I call the orgasm goal, rather than what's really fulfilling in a sexual relationship. It's not necessarily the orgasm. It's the kissing, it's the touching, it's the emotional and physical connection. Now, again, we live in a world where the last 5 years I've dealt a lot more with sex addiction, and that's really just all about quick, hot sex. And, if that's your approach, that's going to be different. But if you're really looking to date someone, you can take it slowly, get to learn about that person, kiss, touch, feel safe. Because the other thing is, if you're going to disclose your status to someone, you want to feel that you can trust that person. One of the things I hear around HIV and also around 12-step programs is the anonymity. Like, can I trust if I share this with this person that they're not going to tell everybody else? That's something you have to consider, because you have no control over that. So the more you can trust someone and feel comfortable with them, the more likely you're going to feel comfortable sharing that with them, and trust that they're not going to share that with other people. The best way to tell somebody is just to be direct and honest about it, and share your status. And now a lot of people, the other issue that comes up a lot in terms of telling somebody is how that person reacts. And just yesterday somebody told me they shared it with a friend, and the friend started asking all these questions that he didn't want to deal with. It was like, oh, how did you get it? What did you do? Are you a top or bottom? All those things that had nothing to do with it. And then, he was, unfortunately, he had a lot of regret that he had shared that with his friend. And so he didn't really feel trusted, and he lost a lot of trust in that person. So, there's that other aspect of where you're ready to deal with all those kinds of issues. The other issue that's really prominent is when to disclose. Do I disclose, if I just meet you, do I disclose that right away? Do I get to know you or not? And even sexually, some people deal with, well, we're only going to use protected sex, so I don't need to disclose. Or we're not going to have anal sex, so do I still need to disclose that or not? So there's all those questions that also go into a person's thinking about, what I'm going to disclose, when I'm going to disclose, and you have to have had some forethought. Again, I guess the last thing I'll say is, in the age of internet sex, everything I just said is really not relevant, because the issue then becomes there's one goal, and it's only orgasm and sexual contact. It's not really a relationship necessarily. So that's a whole different topic.
Great, thank you. So, Rebecca, to turn that question on its head a bit, can I sue somebody if I have sex with him or her and then find out later that they were HIV positive? What if I am HIV positive and am concerned that I might have become reinfected?
So I'll start with the first one. Can you sue someone if you have sex with them, and then later find out that they're HIV positive? Always. The question is, are you in a position to win? What type of documentation do you have at all? At the end of the day, it comes down to the documentation. And then vice versa, what documentation do you have to protect yourself if someone decides to sue you? And there are several ways to do this. We actually, up here, I made a few extra copies. The Zero Project has a brochure out. It gives a whole bunch of suggestions on how to document that you've disclosed in an effort to protect yourself in advance should someone decide to take some sort of legal action against you. And one of the ideas that they have, the most formal one, is actually an HIV disclosure acknowledgement statement. And again, this is all up to you if you're comfortable having someone sign this. But it is unfortunately, something that is out there, and also fortunately, could really protect you at the end of the
Bring
day.
it, and they sign it, you get it, and you countersign it.
Exactly, you
Do
sign
you
the
get a
state.
copy or what? Is it a carbon copy or what?
This one's not carbon copied, but I guess you could get some carbon paper.
It's crazy.
The old is new again, carbon copies.
Picture of it with the iPhone.
Exactly. Yep. And also some more practical suggestions: saving emails, saving text messages, taking a screenshot of the dating profile. Another suggestion: take your partner with you to the doctor, your caseworker, to have a note in your file that your partner knows your status.
The same concerns about being reinfected.
Oh, right. Right, so what if you're HIV positive and concerned that you might have been reinfected? It's really the same thing here. But the main concern would be what are the damages, how has the reinfection affected your health and your overall well-being. And this would likely be a civil case. It would be very unlikely that it would go to a criminal court. And the number one most important question in civil cases is, does the person that you're suing have any money? If they don't have money, it may not be so worthwhile to sue, and it could be quite difficult to find an attorney who would take your case. And at the AIDS Law Project, we really encourage people to take responsibility for themselves and to be having upfront conversations about sex and to be negotiating whatever rules of engagement work best for them. Too often we're seeing individuals convicted for acts with low to no possible risk of transmission. And we just really, at the end of the day, want to make sure that people understand the law and to make sure that when it's applied, that it's consistent with the science of each other.
If there are laws about HIV, are there laws about syphilis? If I gave somebody syphilis, granted that's curable. Herpes wouldn't be. It's treatable. It just seems like, I was in a swimming pool, and maybe I had shingles and I didn't know it, and it caused a couple other people with shingles. I'd be sued for that too.
Let's hold questions and get through this, and then we'll have lots of time.
Somebody did an accident with a child, and they got measles, and it infected the nursery.
Thanks, Rebecca. So, Terry, is it true that if I have an undetectable viral load and am in treatment for HIV, I cannot transmit the virus? Is it a reasonable approach to give a sex partner some Truvada after we've had sex if they are concerned that they might have been infected? Are there any programs that would help pay for that Truvada, either as PEP or PrEP?
So great question, very timely question with all the news and the media around Truvada. And I saw somebody here today that had a t-shirt on that said, I'm a Truvada whore. So that's, there you go. Did you have that on and now you're...
I changed for my criminalization.
Congratulations to you,
Oh,
Chair.
isn't that great? You're just wearing all kinds of messages. So lots of discussion out there around Truvada and the other blue pill and on and on. And this morning in the New York Times, there was an article yet again about PrEP and Truvada. So first of all, let me answer the first question. Was that is it true if I have an undetectable viral load that I cannot transmit the virus? The chances of transmitting the virus with an undetectable viral load are pretty nil. I've not seen anyone ever say that you cannot transmit the virus. That would be, a real ultimate no, but very, very low. And in actuality, in terms of treatment in the field of HIV, the goal is to get folks adherent on their medications so that their viral loads do become undetectable, thereby reducing the chances of transmission, and even more importantly in my mind is keeping that individual as healthy as possible. So in terms of what the difference between PEP and PrEP, and I don't want to assume that everybody in this group knows that. So PrEP, P-R-E-P, pre-exposure prophylaxis. Prophylaxis, another word for sort of like prevention. And then PEP is post-exposure prophylaxis. So it's the idea that you would be taking what Truvada is, the drug that's been approved for pre-exposure, right? And the way that Truvada works is that you would take that, the CDC has just come out with guidelines that, actually I think they did a pretty good job on that. They've got a website with a lot of great information about their new campaign and talking around HIV that's marketed to gay and bisexual men, but I'll get to that in a minute. So the folks that are ideal populations for taking Truvada as PrEP, so pre-exposure, are serodiscordant couples. So meaning that if one of you is positive and other folks in your primary sexual relationships are not. So serodiscordant gay and or bisexual men who have sex without condoms or have been diagnosed with an STI in the last 6 months. Heterosexual men and women who do not use condoms during sex with partners of unknown HIV status, and active IDUs, intravenous drug users. So those are the primary populations that Truvada is really, I don't want to say it's marketed for, but the recommendations. If you are just happen to one time have a high risk exposure with somebody who's living with HIV, that you would, and you're not already taking PrEP, then you may be able to get PEP, which is the post-exposure. And that needs to be done within 72 hours of that risky encounter. So whether if you were sharing needles with somebody who's positive or having a high-risk sexual activity with that person. And there's no sort of guarantee that that post-exposure treatment is going to prevent HIV. So post-exposure treatment has actually been around for a while and used for healthcare providers, so first responders. Hospitals do make it available to folks who are victims of sexual assault and rape. It's not as mainstreaming as the Truvada is, the pre-exposure. So for folks who fall into those recommended groups to have pre-exposure prophylaxis, there's been some controversy around this, right? So people say, well, people aren't going to use condoms anymore, and now, we're just sort of taking a pill to end HIV. And I think, from my perspective, as someone who has a background in public health and has done prevention education for many, many years, I don't think there's ever one single approach to whatever it is that we're trying to prevent. Whether it's HIV or herpes or obesity or whatever, that it's multi-pronged approach. And certainly PrEP and PEP are two more tools that we can use in our fight to reduce and prevent HIV. So the guidelines that the CDC has issued, I think were really well done. They give information to providers on how to talk to your patient around taking Truvada. So it's not like you're just going to take a vitamin and some days you miss it and some days you don't. It's a drug, and it does have side effects, and it needs to be taken every day for it to become effective. So if someone is not a good pill taker, and I remember when I was doing birth control with college-age women, that if you were not a good pill taker, the birth control pill was not going to be effective for you. So it's the same thing with Truvada. And pill taking, as many of you probably know, is not as easy as it sounds to have to take medication every day, sometimes at the same time every day. So it's a behavior change. So there's a piece of, the sort of taking Truvada and what that's like. I also, people still need to use condoms, and they still need to practice risk reduction behaviors. So Truvada can prevent HIV, but it doesn't do anything for other sexually transmitted infections like herpes and gonorrhea and chlamydia and HPV. So I think it's important, along with that message of Truvada, and there's other workshops here at the summit too that are actually talking very specifically about PrEP, is that we keep that risk reduction, that safer sex messages in our conversations with our partners, and that we use condoms, male and or female condoms. Using water-based lube is really important for pleasure. If sex just feels better when you're using water-based lube, when you're protecting yourself against reinfection or co-infection and transmission, sex is going to be more fun. And when you can disclose your status, when you can have conversations with your partner around intimacy and communication, sex is going to be more fulfilling. Body positioning, is another way to reduce the risk of HIV. So insertive versus penetrative, tops and bottoms. So there's a lot of different things that we can do with a lot of different parts of our bodies. And that if we're worried about disclosing our HIV status, that we think about ways that we can enjoy our sex, our pleasure, and the pleasure of our partners or our partners without taking a greater risk for HIV transmission. So I think I'll stop there. Oh, we're talking about paying, right?
Are
There
there
was a
any
question.
Are there any
Yes.
programs?
Yes, I did a little research on that. So the PrEP is covered by many private insurers in most Medicaid programs. Although the annual cost can run into the thousands of dollars. So if you don't have insurance, or for whatever reason your insurance is not paying for that, that could be a reason why you would not be taking Truvada. And Gilead, who makes Truvada, so Gilead, a pharmaceutical company, offers a medication assistance program. So I think, to say that there are definitely ways that you can get Truvada paid for, I think that depends on your unique situation. And some folks are going to have an easier access to it than other folks just because of the economy of prescriptions and healthcare and that sort of thing. But if you are someone who is in a recommended category, I think that gives you a little bit more sort of rationale for trying to get it paid for. So yeah.
Great, thank you. So now I'm going to open it up for questions from the audience. That gentleman with the stage.
The last question that you asked, started out going in the direction that I was looking for. So we were talking about disclosure, and we know that a lot of the criminality laws don't match the science. So how does the results of the partner study affect disclosure?
The partner. What do you mean by partner study?
The partner study, the treatment as prevention, undetectable viral load.
Okay.
You started to go in that direction, but then it went to spread. So the results, for those who don't know, the results were that the serodiscordant couples, there was no transmission between the partners, and the people that did seroconvert during the study, the analysis of the virus itself showed that it was infection from someone outside of the body. So, you know, using it that treatment as prevention of the undetectable viral load, you know, makes you almost, I don't want to say unable to or 0% chance because nothing's a guarantee, but does that change the need for disclosure? Because if, I mean, I personally have been on meds for 15 years and have been undetectable for 10. So, I mean, I morally feel responsible to disclose, but that's my own personal choice.
Right, and for everyone, regardless of, you know, your undetectable status or not, it really is, it's up to the individual at the end of the day. So I'm not quite sure if it does affect the need to disclose or not.
I think if I could just comment briefly on that, is a lot of this has to do with education, and it has to do with education with the positive person, understanding their viral load, their risk for, you know, secondary, you know, reinfection, co-infection transmission, and also their partner or their partners. So that when somebody does disclose, and Jay had alluded to this, that when, you know, one of his clients disclosed, the other person came back with lots and lots of questions, and it was just, you know, really not what that person had expected or was really prepared for. But I think in thinking about disclosure, and when I'm working with the clients at ActionAIDs and this issue comes up, it's really about being prepared for what is going to need to be discussed and having some information about if your viral load is undetectable, the chances are pretty nil that you're going to be able to transmit the virus. And does your partner understand that? What questions do they have? So there's a strong education piece that has to happen with that.
Great, and also I want to say that in the early days of prevention, we used to talk about whether or not giving blowjobs would put you at risk as opposed to unprotected sex. And we looked at the statistics and the risk, and we thought, well, it's less than, but there is a risk. And so in the partner study, there is risk. It's just minimal risk. And so I think if we're talking about criminalization, I think as long as there is a modicum of risk, that's always going to be the...
Right, and we are still seeing, even if someone is undetectable and they've said, well, you know, maybe you should get tested, like after the fact they've said it later on, we're still seeing people trying to press charges regardless of that.
Brett?
And I just want to say that on the federal standpoint, there is a push, I work at the Department of Health and Human Services, there is a push to get states to update their laws if they specifically criminalize sexual activity for somebody without disclosure for somebody who may be. And that is happening at the state level. So we are seeing states modify their laws, either abolish them altogether or changing them significantly to be in line with modern medical technology. Iowa was the most recent state that changed their laws, and Iowa's relatively conservative. However, they actually did a really great job in bringing their law in line with current medical technology around. So, sorry.
This lady and then this lady.
Along the lines of criminalization and such, if you have a partner and you inform them that you are positive and they are negative and they refuse to use protection, what are your responsibilities at that point? Is there any way they can come back on you if so?
Yeah, this is actually familiar sounding. I mean, again, it is a personal choice whether or not you choose to go forward if your partner is refusing.
I mean, I really care about this person.
Right.
I don't want to see this person get infected. Right? It would be very traumatic for them to find out that they were infected. And I don't know that I could take disclose to them. And being that we've been friends for over 4 years,
Right, yeah, that's
we're still friends,
right,
but it's like there's this tension.
right. Yeah, no, I'd absolutely
They
be,
want to
I'd be
take it to
happy
the
to,
next level, and
right.
I want to say, hold still,
Mhm.
let's stay where we're at, keep it a good friendship, and
Right, understandably. So, but I'd be happy to speak with you more about the details of that later. Okay?
So I had a question about dating, just to bring it back to social isolation piece. And I have a number of clients, some of whom are older adults, some of whom aren't, but they, there's been a lot of discussion about like internet dating and all this, but most of these clients are very low income, they don't have a computer at home, and they don't really want to be going to the library to be using internet dating. And they will really express the desire to be dating again, and really don't seem to know how to do that, how to start. Keeping in mind that for the ones I'm thinking of in particular, they are quite isolated. So it's not like they're part of, activist groups or kind of going out and having a community. And I really feel stuck about how to advise them to take first steps to dating. I feel as stuck as they do in terms of the advice that I give, because I don't know how to recommend a way to begin that will feel safe, that may involve people who are not necessarily positive the way that they are, that's going to involve disclosure or not at some point. So I'm just wondering if there's any advice for whether older adults or not older adults, but kind of how to be dating without internet dating, and where to begin.
So, to me, it's an issue of how to get out of where you are and meet other people. Once you meet other folks, you may be attracted. If you're attracted, then you start to consider dating options. So I think really it's a matter of where do people go to meet people? And that could be volunteering for organizations. It could be faith-based organizations, religious services. There are any number of social activities that, older adults, LGBT older adults, experience social isolation, depression, just given our family structures, it's very unique from the non-LGBT world. And so how do we meet people when we're older and our friends are dying, and again, that is whether or not the person is HIV positive or negative, it's what is available to them out in society that will help them be engaged in civic activity.
Yeah, I would agree with what Heshi said, basically. I think rather than addressing it directly about dating, I would address it more from their social isolation perspective and how can you get connected to other people more. And I think that's an easier path to dealing with that. And then, follow up with what type of interests do they have? What, are they religious? Do they go to a church or synagogue or whatever? Are they interested in their community? So I think it's probably more healthy to start it from dealing with their social isolation. Because the other thing is, if you get into dating, if someone's feeling socially isolated, depressed and anxious, they're not really projecting a real positive perspective on who they are anyway. So I think the social isolation and getting them connected to people would probably be the first approach I would use.
And I'll just add 2 cents here that, dating does not necessarily get easier as we get older. And nobody teaches us how to date. There's no book, there's no, Robert's rules of, order or anything like that. And if there are, it's a bunch of hooey, because everybody is individual. So if I was working with somebody around dating, I would find out what that means to them. Well, what does that mean when you say you want to start dating? And, help them with maybe some skill building. So, communication skills, taking risks, that sort of thing. Just to help them, build their self-confidence or self-esteem, their self-efficacy to be in, relationships. But really validating that dating is not easy no matter what stage of life you're at.
This gentleman.
Sherry, you just made me think of a couple things. You were talking about PEP and PrEP, and you talked about the CDC releasing the guidelines, and New York State did also, and we all know that there are going to be hurdles, all right, because implementing these guidelines, getting providers, because there are providers that will create barriers for people going in to get PrEP. We know this. And then, with PEP, there's that time, we miss the 72 hours. 36 is best, 72 would do. If it were another day, it'd be less, but just lie and say there's only 7 years. Again, I just thought of something. If God damn it, if I had this available, I would have done it. Shit. Okay. 86, maybe I have a couple of exposures. If now, if I had a child, I would tell my child, we're talking about sex and within pregnancy, with a woman or a man. If it were a gay man like me, I would say, let's pretend you were out last night and you had unsafe sex. I'm going to take you to the center, and I'm going to get you a month's supply of PEP. So that if it happens, it's right there for you. In addition with the condoms, in addition with everything I educated you on. And there might be some legal issues with that. Maybe people would judge me. But I don't think I'd send my kid away. Or I would knowingly let my kid live in my house knowing that they're sexually active without them having access to that. Because I wouldn't want them to wait and have to stand in line in an emergency room and maybe get the wrong nurse or the wrong PCP that wouldn't give it to them. Because that's happened.
Well, it'll be interesting to see.
I think I would do that. I would give anybody that's negative and wants to stay that way, maybe they need to go
If it's
a bad night last night.
Yeah, if it's made more widely available, because I think of the morning after pill.
Well,
So, same sort of thing. So,
no one's going to know if you're lying. Just say I have a bad night.
well, and you know what? We're talking about sexual health, and we're talking about the United States. So it's difficult, challenging times. Yeah.
I am actually a parent, and I've always been concerned because a lot of my friends growing up were involved in sexual health issues and reproductive rights things. And when my daughter turned 14 or 15, my mother was astonished that my ex-wife and I were talking about that stuff with her. But we as a nation are so far behind on just general sex education, let alone specifically HIV prevention.
I mean, I'd be, if I'm just talking to my gay son, if I had a gay son, I'm just talking about condoms. No, my kid would have condoms, and he'd have a month's supply of PrEP, and I'd find a way to give it to him.
And don't forget the lube, because that'll make the condoms fun.
No, seriously, and I would do it, and there wouldn't be any.
Yeah, Terry, I actually got two questions, but the first one is the literature that you said, where is that available? Is that available here today?
I don't have enough copies today for everybody. I just brought them as little samples and little teases, I guess you could say. But some of the material is available at Action AIDS. Some of the material is available at ACREA. And some of this one is a Merck brochure. I bet you if Merck is here and you ask them for a copy of their 10 tips for living well with HIV over 50, they could get that to you. If they don't have it today, they should. But yeah, so.
Okay, and my second question, which is really weird, the last 2 times I got tested, I've been told I had 0 viral load. I never heard that before. I heard I'm impeccable, but he told me that I went from like 500 and something up to almost 900 CD4 and 0 viral. I don't know what that means.
I believe the test measures
Before, I was told I was undetectable.
to 10 to 20. Yeah, Mark.
It really depends on where they send your blood out for the labs, because depending on the labs, they have different sensitivity. So, and there isn't a standard for it. So some labs are very sensitive and they can get down to 50%. copies or less.
Okay.
And then they're more likely to say something like we have 0 viral load. Other labs, it's 400 or less, and they consider that undetectable. That's something you should really talk to your physician about in terms of the sensitivity of the viral load test that you're doing.
Yeah,
But
I-
generally,
I-
anytime you
don't
they say
worry about it.
undetectable
You
or
keep taking your
0,
meds, do what you're doing, you're doing great. Okay?
You're undetectable. You're
Yeah.
undetectable.
Well, the secret is taking your meds.
Exactly.
Every 12 hours, 6 and 6.
Exactly. Other questions? Yes.
This is for Jay. Could you talk, you mentioned a little bit about social isolation and sexual addiction. I've run into some clients who are in deep denial that those two things are connected. Could you talk just a little bit about, I guess, like raising that awareness with a client who's like very in denial of that?
Firstly, your point is very valid. A lot of people are in denial of their sex addiction, and you know, there's been a lot of conversation in the gay community about sex addiction in general, you know, versus losing a part of sexual identity that many gay men fought for in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So there's a lot of that sort of that's still left over. But there is a lot of sex addiction that is promoted through internet. It's easy hookups. You know, there's Manhunt, Grindr, and the whole list of apps and things that you go through. You just really have to continuing to challenge them, and you know, it depends if they're depressed. I mean, it depends on what they're presenting as well. You know, are they presenting on depressed? Are they giving you enough other clinical information for you to, and are they open to hearing? Sounds like you're a little socially isolated. Do you have any connections? Do you go out? Do you have friends? You know, you're involved in any kind of activities, volunteer, church, you know, whatever it might be. So I think the first thing is talking about the social isolation, and then sometimes I'm just real depressed. It sounds like you're using the computer to numb those feelings of depression and isolation. And I don't know what you know about addiction, but it's not any different than anything else you use to numb feelings. You know, you're using sex now to numb feelings. Other people use drugs, alcohol. My joke, just to lighten a little bit, is not to be an addict, it would be shopping. But, you know, again, all those dynamics are the same. If you're using something to numb some feelings, it's an addiction. And then it takes people sometimes a long time to accept that. But I wouldn't be shy in presenting that to them, and, you know, you just really need to be direct about that. But talk more about their social isolation and depression and stuff as well.
Kenny?
Terry, real quick about the PrEP. I was, when they first came out with PrEP, attended a thing where the salesman from Gilead was promoting it, and zoning it, and the CCR said. And at the time they were saying it was considered a short-term fix. And so my question then, to your knowledge, as far as anything, as far as they're providing it for uninsured people, their program to provide it, is there a time limit on it that you know of?
You mean a time limit for taking it?
No, that they will provide it for you free of cost if you're uninsured.
Oh, I can't answer that. It's a really great question, and I think that would be something that would be smart to ask, because if they're only going to cover it, okay.
I'm talking to them. They say, I asked them, could they do 1 million people? And they said, we don't know. But they said that we will offer it as long as we can on the assistance program. And that's all they would tell me.
Yeah, so it's a pretty open-ended thing. I mean, hopefully they don't give it to somebody and a month later say, I'm sorry, we can't do that anymore. Yeah, so, yeah.
And use the profits that they're getting off the hep C.
That's a whole other conversation.
Kenny, that answer? Mark?
A comment and then a question. I totally agree with what you said, Terry, that, you know, we should be using whatever we can in terms of controlling HIV infections and prevention. And I think PrEP is an extremely promising development. There's a few things that are happening around this that I have concern. One is that, you know, the studies that have been done that show that it's effective have always been done in the context of condom use. And there's been kind of a leap from that evidence base to saying, you know, we can throw condoms away. And that's kind of the message I've been hearing. Like I see this on listservs and things like this, the condom-free future, all of that. And I think in our enthusiasm about PrEP, I think we need to make sure that we still emphasize, you know, we know a lot of ways to protect yourselves, and condoms are one of the easiest, best ways with the fewest side effects. I know men don't like to use them, you know, I'm a man, so it's, you know, but, you know, I mean, so that's, I think that's something that gets lost in the discussion. I think the other thing that gets lost, maybe you can speak to this, is no one really talks about adherence with PrEP. And, you know, how adherent you need to be in that medication. And I think there are some situations where people are likely to be more adherent to PrEP, and it's going to be more effective. And there are going to be other situations not so much. And I think, you know, people who might have a sex addiction, people that compulsively, people who might be using alcohol or substances, may think, well, okay, I got the PrEP in my pocket, and I'll, you know, take it from time to time. You kind of get a sense false protection because you do need to maintain a certain level of medication
Absolutely. And I think that goes back to, you know, the pill-taking behavior and just making that behavior change, having those pieces of your life in place where, you know, you feel you can do that and you can, you know, take the Truvada on a regular, consistent basis. And it also speaks to the relationship with your healthcare provider. If your healthcare provider is prescribing you Truvada and as a, you know, as PrEP, they need to be having a conversation around condoms and risk reduction. And I'll say it again, lube, you know. And, you know, providers are writing prescriptions for Viagra and they're not talking about condoms. And Viagra's advertising Viagra, and, you know, I think we should see Trojan on the side of the rowboat, you know, or whatever is, you know, wherever they're sailing off or in the bathtub or something. So, but there's a disconnect there. It's a huge disconnect, and I don't really see it different than Truvada. You know, people just say, "Well, just take this, and you know, we don't have to worry about HIV anymore. No more condoms." And you know, condoms get a bad rap. I think that they can be a fun way to you know, use as an eroticizing safer sex. Lots of different condoms on the market, and when I talk to our clients about using condoms, I say find one you like and make it your own. You know, if you use a condom and you don't like it, try a different kind. There's hundreds out there. So really getting folks, again, just to have a little switch in their mindset. And again, it's risk reduction, right? So if you have oral sex and you're not worried about herpes, because herpes is, you know, we say oral sex is low risk. Well, yes, it is. And, you know, oral sex is really low for HIV. But for herpes, sky high, because it's skin-to-skin contact. And it can go other places, right? So if you go down on somebody with an oral herpes sore, you can get it in your genitals and vice versa. So in terms of that whole risk reduction message, if we're talking about HIV prevention, oral sex is a great, you know, it can be very pleasurable, you know, and shy away from the more penetrative, you know, sex behavior. So remember that risk reduction continuum. Condoms and Truvada is just one more piece in the safer sex world.
Thanks. This
I
gentleman.
just wanted to say that Grindr last week has now set up your undetectable on Grindr. So I think that's a big change for Grindr. And I just wonder how the other, like BBRT and other are being able.
So now you can put undetectable, negative, or positive, like there's all different kinds of choices.
Exactly.
And
People checking it? Have you noticed?
It's what?
Or have people been checking that box?
You're assuming he's experienced with that.
I'm married. I just learned that.
Oh, you learned it somewhere else. I thought maybe you saw it on the site. I'm sorry.
Okay, good.
So we have time for one more question.
I think a lot of times men are afraid of condoms because they get all this interruption to sex to put it on. That's like to be part of the act. They could be and then the preparation, and then
Right,
getting yourself ready, and then having it actually put on for you, and then proceeding to.
Those are great suggestions. Thank you. Thank you. And I want to thank Brett Palmer, who's in the front here. He's with the Department of Health and Human Services and was instrumental in helping to pull together this program today. So thank you. And thank you all for coming. Thank Terry and Rebecca and Jay. Thanks.
Thank you.